A cop handcuffs a nobody in his courtroom, then learns she's the new police chief. You don't belong here, sweetheart. Step back before I put you in bracelets. Officer Oliver Grant's voice dripped with venom, his hand hovering aggressively over his Glock 19. Vanessa King didn't flinch. She just stared at his brass badge. You have no legal grounds to ask me to move, she replied, her voice eerily calm, echoing in the quiet courtroom. Watch me, Grant sneered, violently lunging forward. He slapped the cold steel handcuffs onto her wrists, completely unaware that he had just arrested his own absolute worst nightmare, the new chief of police. The heavy oak doors of the Cook County Circuit Court swung open on a humid Tuesday morning, the air smelling of floor wax, stale coffee, and quiet desperation. In the front row of courtroom 302, in a section marked Reserved for Law Enforcement and Legal Counsel, sat a woman who looked entirely out of place. Vanessa King didn't look like a lawyer, and she certainly didn't look like a cop. Dressed in faded jeans, an oversized Yale sweatshirt, and scuffed sneakers, she looked like a tired graduate student. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, thick black glasses on her nose, a battered notebook in her lap. She was watching the gears of a broken machine turn. After a decorated 20-year career as an elite FBI anti-corruption agent in Washington, D.C., the mayor had personally begged her to take over the local police force, a department plagued by scandals, excessive force lawsuits, and a deeply ingrained culture of corruption. Vanessa agreed, but on one condition. For her first 3 days in the city, before her official swearing-in and press conference, she wanted to walk around completely incognito, unfiltered by the polished brass and rehearsed salutes of a formal inspection. She wanted to see the rot for herself, and she was finding plenty of it. Her eyes were fixed on the witness stand, where Officer Oliver Grant was giving testimony, a physically imposing man with a tight buzz cut, his uniform stretched tight to show off his physique, his posture arrogant, his tone condescending as he answered the public defender's questions with exaggerated sighs and eye rolls. What caught Vanessa's trained eye wasn't just his terrible demeanor, but the gleaming Rolex Daytona on his wrist, a watch worth well over $20,000 on a patrol officer's $65,000 salary. That watch screamed extortion louder than any siren. As Grant finished testimony, Vanessa immediately recognized as a poorly constructed lie meant to justify an illegal search. He stepped down from the stand and the judge called a brief recess. Grant strutted down the aisle, his boots echoing on the hardwood floor. He stopped at the front row, eyes narrowing on Vanessa, taking in the jeans and sweatshirt. His lip curled in disgust. To a predator like Grant, she wasn't a person. She was a target, a nobody. "Hey!" he barked. "Can you not read? Or are you just stupid?" Vanessa set down her pen and looked up, her expression an unreadable mask of calm. "Excuse me?" she asked, her voice soft but carrying quiet authority Grant was too arrogant to notice. "The sign," Grant said, stepping into her space, tapping the brass plaque. "You don't look like a lawyer, and you sure don't look like a cop, so get up and move to the back before I drag you there myself." Vanessa didn't move. She simply memorized the badge pinned to his chest, number 8442. "The courtroom is in recess, officer," she replied smoothly, citing municipal code. "During a recess, seating restrictions in the gallery are suspended. Furthermore, as a citizen, I have a First Amendment right to observe public trials. I'm fine right here." Grant's face flushed crimson. In his precinct, nobody spoke back to him, certainly not a woman in a college sweatshirt. He leaned in close enough that Vanessa could smell his peppermint gum masking stale cigarette smoke. "You don't belong here, sweetheart," he hissed, his hand dropping to his sidearm. "Step back before I put you in bracelets." The courtroom fell dead silent. The remaining lawyers and clerks turned to watch, certain this was about to end badly for the woman in the Yale sweatshirt. But Vanessa's heart rate didn't spike. She'd stared down cartel hitmen and corrupt politicians. A steroid-fueled bully with a badge was a minor inconvenience. She needed to see exactly how far he'd go, the ultimate stress test for her new department. "I am giving you a lawful order to vacate this section," Grant growled, stepping closer. "An order is only lawful if backed by statute, Officer Grant. Vanessa replied coldly, having read his nameplate. You are acting outside the scope of your authority. I strongly suggest you walk away. You have no legal grounds to ask me to move. Watch me, Grant sneered. His hand shot out, gripping her left wrist with brutal force, his thick fingers digging painfully into her skin. He yanked her violently up out of the wooden bench, pulling her to her feet with such force that her notebook clattered to the floor. Her voice stayed unnervingly steady even as her eyes finally flashed with a dangerous icy fire. You have exactly 3 seconds to remove your hand before you ruin your entire career, officer. Grant laughed, a harsh barking sound. Ruin my career? Lady, I am the law in this building. With a practiced, aggressive motion, he spun her around, forcing her arms behind her back, and pulled a pair of heavy-duty handcuffs from his belt. The sound of the ratcheting metal teeth echoed sharply through the silent courtroom as he clamped the steel tight around her wrists, squeezing them an extra notch on purpose, tight enough to bite into the delicate skin and cut off circulation. A classic bully tactic designed to inflict maximum pain and humiliation without leaving a mark severe enough for a hospital visit. You are under arrest, Grant announced loudly, making sure the remaining spectators heard him assert his dominance. On what charges? Vanessa asked, staring straight ahead. Failure to obey a lawful order, disturbing the peace, and resisting arrest, Grant rattled off. The standard contempt of cop charges corrupt officers use nationwide to punish anyone who bruises their ego. He shoved her forward. Let's go, criminal. Time to see how tough you are in a holding cell. The perp walk through the courthouse was designed to break her spirit. Grant kept a firm grip on her arm, pushing her past crowds of onlookers while she kept her head high, her face a mask of stoicism. The cold steel digging into her skin, a constant reminder of the failure of leadership in this department. Outside, Grant shoved her toward his patrol vehicle, forcing her down into the cramped back seat of the cage. Enjoy the ride, sweetheart, he mocked, slamming the door. Inside, the air was stifling. As Grant climbed in and started the engine, Vanessa allowed herself a small, dangerous smile. Grant thought he'd just asserted dominance over a nobody. He had no idea he'd just strapped a lit stick of dynamite to his own career. The drive to the 12th precinct was a masterclass in unprofessionalism. Grant drove recklessly, throwing her around the back seat, blasting music to drown out complaints. Vanessa said nothing. She sat in silence, mentally cataloging every violation: no seatbelt on a prisoner, reckless driving, failure to read Miranda rights. The list of infractions was growing long enough to draft termination paperwork in her head. The precinct was chaos. Phones ringing off the hook, officers shouting across the room, a group of intoxicated detainees cuffed to a long metal bench yelling obscenities, institutional green paint peeling from the walls, the floor slick with years of accumulated grime. Grant marched her to the booking desk, where a portly, balding Sergeant Miller sat slowly typing on a greasy keyboard. What do we have here, Ollie? Miller asked, looking up with a bored expression, chewing on a matchstick. Got a live one, Sarge, Grant said proudly, shoving Vanessa against the high desk. Failure to comply, disturbing the peace, resisting arrest, and assaulting a police officer. She tried to kick me when I was cuffing her. Vanessa's eyebrows rose slightly. Falsifying an official police report was a felony. I did no such thing, she said clearly. There are at least 20 witnesses in that courtroom who will testify to that fact. Miller laughed. Tell it to the judge, lady. Name? Jane Doe, Vanessa replied smoothly. Grant scowled, grabbing her shoulder. Give him your real name. Or what? Vanessa interrupted, locking eyes with him, the intensity making the larger man take a half step back before he caught himself. You've already arrested me and falsely accused me of assault. I decline to identify myself until I'm granted my phone call. Miller rolled his eyes. Put her in cell 4. Let her cool off. Grant shoved her into a filthy concrete cell containing only a steel toilet and a metal slab, finally unlocking the handcuffs and leaving red welts on her wrists. Get comfortable, he sneered, slamming the iron door shut. Vanessa rubbed her wrists and walked to the bars. Officer Grant, she called out. I want my phone call. Grant sighed, shoving a cordless phone through the bars. Make it quick, and don't call a lawyer. Call a bondsman. You're going to need a lot of cash. Vanessa didn't dial a lawyer or a bondsman. She dialed a private, unlisted number. It rang twice. Sterling, a deep voice answered. Thomas, it's Vanessa, she said calmly. Mayor Thomas Sterling laughed warmly. Vanessa, I was just about to call you. The press is setting up at City Hall. Your appointment ceremony is in 45 minutes. Where are you? There's been a change of plans, Vanessa said, inspecting the grime under her fingernails. I won't be able to make it to City Hall. Why? Are you stuck in traffic? No, she said, a hard edge creeping into her tone. I'm currently locked in holding cell 4 at the 12th precinct. I was unlawfully arrested, physically assaulted, and maliciously charged by one of your officers, Officer Oliver Grant, badge number 8442. Dead silence followed, the silence of a politician realizing his police department had just committed a catastrophic blunder. I'm on my way, Mayor Sterling whispered, his voice trembling with fury. I'm bringing the commissioner. Do not move. I don't plan on it, Vanessa said, hanging up. She sat back down on the cold slab, closed her eyes, and waited for the explosion. 30 minutes later, in the relaxed bullpen of the 12th precinct, Grant sat with his feet up, bragging to Sergeant Miller about how he'd handled the crazy woman at the courthouse when the double doors blew open. Every conversation in the room died instantly. Striding through the doors, his face boiling crimson, was Mayor Sterling, flanked by the police commissioner and the outgoing acting chief, trailed by a dozen reporters with cameras and microphones. The mayor had simply told them, if you want the real story of this city's future, follow me. Grant scrambled to his feet, brushing crumbs off his uniform, his mind racing. Was this a surprise commendation? He stepped forward with a confident smile. Mr. Mayor, welcome to the 12th precinct. Shut your mouth, Sterling snarled, walking straight past him as if he were furniture. Grant froze in confusion as the entire entourage marched past the booking desk toward the holding cells. Sir, you can't go back there. It's an unsecured area, Sergeant Miller stammered. Stand down, Sergeant, or I'll take your badge right now, the commissioner snapped. Grant followed at a distance, a cold sweat breaking out on his neck as the mayor stopped in front of cell 4. Camera lights illuminated the dark cell block, and the woman in the Yale sweatshirt sitting calmly on the metal slab. Mayor Sterling gripped the bars, his knuckles white, looking at the red welts on her wrists. Do you have the keys, Commissioner? He asked quietly. The commissioner's hands shook as he unlocked the door. Vanessa stood, smoothed her sweatshirt, and walked out. Not like a victim, but like a predator stepping out of a cage she'd allowed them to put her in. Camera shutters fired like machine guns. Grant pushed through the reporters. Mr. Mayor, with respect, you can't let her out. She's a violent vagrant. She assaulted me. She resisted arrest. Vanessa turned, fixing her cold eyes on him, and the hallway went utterly silent. Officer Grant, the mayor said, his voice carrying to every microphone. Allow me to introduce you to the woman you just illegally arrested, physically assaulted, and threw into a concrete box. This is Vanessa King, former special agent in charge of the FBI's anti-corruption task force, and as of 9 o'clock this morning, your new chief of police. If a human being could physically shatter, Officer Oliver Grant would have disintegrated into dust right there on the grime-covered floor of the 12th precinct. All the blood drained from his face, leaving him a sickening shade of gray. His knees visibly buckled, forcing him to grab the iron bars of the adjacent cell just to stay standing. His mouth opened and closed like a fish suffocating on dry land, but no sound came out. Chief, he finally managed to squeak out, his voice high and thin, completely stripped of its former bravado. I didn't know. I thought you weren't in uniform. You didn't identify yourself. Is that your defense, Officer Grant? Chief King asked. Her voice was no longer soft. It was the sharp, commanding crack of a military general. That your abuse of power and disregard for civil rights are acceptable as long as the victim isn't wearing brass stars? You didn't ask for my identification. You demanded I move from a public space where I had every legal right to be. When I informed you of the law, you resorted to violence, handcuffing me with malicious intent to cause pain, then instructing your sergeant to falsify a police report with fictitious felony charges. No, Chief, that's a misunderstanding, Grant pleaded, sweat pouring down his face. I was just doing my job. Vanessa didn't blink. Commissioner, relieve Officer Grant of his weapon and badge, immediately. Sarge! Grant yelled desperately, but Miller stared at the floor, looking like a man preparing for his own execution. The commissioner unclipped Grant's duty belt and unpinned his badge, the metallic click echoing louder than anything else in the room. Chief, please, Grant begged, his voice cracking into a sob, all bravado gone. I have a family. I have a pension. It was a mistake. I'm a good cop, I swear. A good cop? Vanessa repeated softly, a terrifying hint of a smile touching her mouth. She reached under her collar and pulled out a small black device, a high-fidelity FBI recording device, its red light blinking steadily. Grant's eyes bulged. I was running an internal affairs sting before I even took the oath of office, Vanessa explained to the press pool holding up the wire. This department is infected with a culture of intimidation, brutality, and corruption, and I needed to know exactly how deep the rot went. Officer Grant, you just provided the prosecution with undeniable audio evidence of battery, false arrest, and perjury. She turned back to him. You don't have a pension anymore, Mr. Grant. You have a cell. She looked at the commissioner. Place him under arrest. Use his own handcuffs. I believe they're still on the booking desk. This time, it was Oliver Grant wearing the cold steel, wincing as the commissioner cuffed his hands behind his back without bothering to leave them loose. The perp walk out of the precinct mirrored the one from an hour earlier, but infinitely more humiliating. Reporters flanking him, cameras capturing tears of humiliation on his cheeks. The arrogant bully had been utterly broken. The fallout was swift, brutal, and total. The footage of the press conference in the holding cell went viral globally within hours, becoming a defining symbol of police reform. The next morning, Vanessa King was officially sworn in as chief of police, trading her Yale sweatshirt for a tailored blue uniform with 4 gold stars gleaming on her collar. Her first act as chief was an earthquake that shook the department to its core. Using the wire evidence and a subsequent investigation into Grant's past, she uncovered a massive extortion ring operating out of the 12th precinct. Sergeant Miller was fired and indicted. A dozen other officers who had protected Grant or participated in his corrupt activities were suspended without pay pending federal charges. The precinct was purged of its poison. 6 months later, the justice system finally came full circle. The heavy oak doors of the Cook County Circuit Court swung open again. This time, Vanessa King didn't sit in the gallery. She sat in the witness stand, her uniform perfectly pressed, her posture impeccable. Across the room at the defense table sat Oliver Grant. He was no longer wearing his tight, intimidating uniform or his $20,000 Rolex Daytona. He was wearing a baggy, bright Orange County jail jumpsuit. He looked 10 years older, his muscles deflated, his face pale and sunken from months in protective custody. Chief King testified with cold, clinical precision. She didn't embellish. She didn't gloat. She simply presented the facts, the audio recordings, and the undeniable truth of Grant's corruption. When the jury returned after only 2 hours of deliberation, the verdict was a foregone conclusion. Guilty on all counts. False imprisonment, aggravated assault under color of authority, perjury, and official misconduct. Judge Harrison, whose courtroom Grant had desecrated 6 months earlier, looked down on him with profound disgust. Oliver Grant, you were given a badge and a gun to protect the vulnerable. Instead, you used them to terrorize the innocent and enrich yourself. You are a disgrace to the uniform and a danger to society. This court sentences you to no less than 8 years in the state penitentiary without the possibility of early parole. The gavel struck the block with the finality of a coffin slamming shut. Grant collapsed into his chair, burying his face in his cuffed hands, sobbing uncontrollably as the bailiffs moved in to drag him away. Chief Vanessa King stood up, adjusted her cover, and walked out of the courtroom. She stepped out into the blazing afternoon sun, breathing in the fresh air. The machine of justice was no longer broken. It had been repaired, piece by piece, starting with the removal of one corrupt gear. She had taken out the trash, and as she walked toward her waiting cruiser, she knew the streets of her city were finally, truly safe. What goes around always comes back around, especially when you abuse the power meant to protect others. Officer Oliver Grant thought his badge and his gun made him an invincible god among men, but he learned the hard way that true, unyielding justice doesn't wear a blindfold when it comes to deep-rooted corruption.